All right, Second Chronicles chapter 36. Let's call this one Structure again, but subtitle this one Fulfilled, because we are going to talk about a character or a person who is actually a sub-theme in this chapter, but has an entire book of the Bible devoted to his ministry or his prophecies, and that is Jeremiah the prophet, one of the major prophets who has one of the longer treatments or longer books in the Bible devoted to him. But here he simply gets a shout out, for lack of a better term, to some of the prophecies he made that were fulfilled. After this chapter goes on to talk about the kings who led Judah into its final decline. First and foremost, Jehoiachin, who reigns for a little while before Pharaoh Necho of Egypt takes him essentially into custody and leaves in his place Jehoiakim, a leader who is described as not leading especially well, doing evil, and then himself being taken into captivity to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, who is going to replace him with Jehoiachin, his son, who's going to lead for a short time before he is finally replaced by Zedekiah, the final ruler of Judah, before they are carted off into Babylonian captivity with only a small remnant left to tend the land. And in describing Judah's final decline, we are going to see the reign of 4 kings condensed into a single chapter that is discussed in much more detail during the reign of Jeremiah, a prophet who we get to see lamenting Josiah as he passes kind of tragically, even though he was a great king. He passes in a tragic way, not paying attention to Pharaoh Necho, who was actually not among the kings of God's people, but he was on a mission from God. Josiah, believing that he was simply out on a mission of war and not a mission of God, goes out to meet him in battle and falls because Pharaoh Necho was actually telling him the truth. And as Josiah is lamented as still being a great king who simply died under tragic circumstances, having made a tragic mistake, Jeremiah is going to lament him as a great king. And we are going to see how Jeremiah's life changes significantly once this last great king of Judah dies. Because during its decline, Judah is actually going to become the kind of place where it becomes more and more difficult to simply speak truth. And that is the problem. That's Jeremiah's job. And so he is going to become way less popular under the last 4 kings than he might have been in the days of Josiah. And even though Jeremiah's popularity declines, the truth in his prophecies remains constant, which might be the first practical note for us, understanding that the word encourages us in the New Testament to speak truth in season and out of season. Because I think the temptation that faces us all is to tailor our words to the moods of the crowd, our circle, family, etc., in ways that simply alter or water down the truth of what we might actually see. And so Jeremiah endured a lot to make sure that the truth stayed constant. And why was that? Just so he could sound smarter than everybody else, making sure they knew that he saw things that they didn't? Well, that might have been it, but pain and social isolation can weed out those kinds of motives when you're really suffering. It's a lot less likely that I'm willing to speak purely from ego if I'm suffering to actually tell the truth. And that's what the book of Jeremiah describes. A prophet who is suffering a lot to say the things that he's saying because of the second thing that I noticed, because his truth was not simply vain truth or vain observation. It was part of the structure by which those going into captivity were going to be able to lead their lives effectively if they were going to thrive during the years of captivity. How do we know? Because at the end of 2 Kings, we saw that the only one of these 4 kings who did well in captivity was Jehoiachin, the one king who both listened to Jeremiah and altered his leadership style, understanding that Jeremiah was saying, look, the captivity is inevitable. This is not a war we're going to win. Likewise, the people, understanding again that Jeremiah's words were not simply idle truths, but they were truths that allowed the people to structure their time in Babylon as simply a temporary stay. More importantly, for the leaders of the people, understanding the ways in which they needed to preserve the structure that was reinstated under Josiah, since that would facilitate their return to Judah and starting their lives over again in a territory now ravaged and torn down by war. And so in these 2 chapters, 2 Chronicles 36 and Ezra chapter 1, 3 times tell us that the words of Jeremiah were fulfilled. They are showing us the words of a man who suffered to speak truth, and likewise for us, to the degree that God has given us the ability to speak truth or do anything that allows people to effectively overcome difficult days. My prayer for you is my prayer for me. That no matter how difficult it might be, that God give us the strength to overcome the temptation to water down our words and our deeds when they might actually have the potential to help people structure their lives to thrive in times of difficulty.